Right, good afternoon everyone. It's 4 o'clock, it's that time of day, so it's Cabinet. So welcome, it's good to see you all. Before I move on to the agenda items, can I just draw your attention to the information displayed on the screen and also on the front of the agenda. I particularly want everyone to note the fire and emergency procedures, please. If the fire alarm sounds, please leave through the front of the Council House where you came in and gather at the other side of the Council House car park. Finally, can you please ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent mode? Thank you. Right, let's move forward then. Any apologies? I think we're all here. Yes, there's no apologies, fine. Does anyone have any declarations of interest in relation to any of the items on the agenda this afternoon? No?
Leader, just for clarity, if I may, in terms of the administration commitments, there is reference to the naval base, so I would declare that if we actually debate that, I'll leave the room for that one paragraph. That's okay. It is indeed.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Right, can we move then to the minutes of the meeting on the 26th of September? They've been circulated. I assume you've all read them. Is everyone happy to accept them as a correct and accurate record?
Agreed.
Can I ask you to indicate, please, that you're happy with that? Thank you very much. I have no items of Chair's urgent business. So we move immediately to questions from the public, and there is one question from a member of the public, Mr. Bridgman. Welcome. Would you like to come forward and put your question, please? Thank you.
In the light of photographic evidence published in the Herald, what enforcement action will be taken under the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990 or other relevant legislation to ensure that the owner repairs and maintains the Palace Theatre to an acceptable standard?
Thank you very much, Mr. Bridgman. This falls under Councillor Nicholson's portfolio, so can I ask you, please, Patrick, if you would respond?
Good afternoon, Mr. Bridgman. Thank you very much indeed for your question. The Palace Theatre and Joining Hotel are important Grade 2 star listed buildings with a prominent impact on Union Street. This is why policy PLY 34, the submitted Plymouth and South West Devon Joint Local Plan, not only supports the preservation and enhancement and historic character of the Union Street Conservation Area, but specifically encourages a high-quality restoration of the Palace Theatre, appropriate to the special architectural and historic character of the building that provides daytime as well as nighttime activity. However, we must remember that the buildings are privately owned and therefore the responsibility is with the landowner for their repair and maintenance. Notwithstanding this, the City Council has been prepared to take proactive action. In July 2013, the City Council discussed urgent repair works with the owner and with English Heritage. These works were completed by the owner, leading to a significant improvement in the condition of the building without the need for an urgent repair works notice being issued. As part of the Historic Buildings Tidy Up Enforcement Initiative in 2015, a Section 215 notice was served on the building with further improvement works carried out, at the time in compliance with that notice. City Council officers continue to assess the condition of the building and are actively investigating the matter. Cooperative discussions are taking place with the owner regarding improvements and repair. The building is also inspected under the City Council's duties in connection with the building regulations and dangerous structures to ensure that the building does not pose a risk to the public. Ultimately, the future of the building is inextricably linked to the need to find a long-term viable and sustainable use, which is why the City Council's planning policies are supportive in this regard.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. There's the reply for you, Mr. Bridgman. We'll furnish you with a hard copy of that reply. Thank you. And that will be entered into the minutes of the meeting this afternoon when they're produced. Thank you very much for coming. Right, colleagues. Moving on to the next agenda item. It's item 6 this afternoon. which is an update for you really on the commitments that we made back in May 16 when we took office. And what I tried to do there for your information is to set out those 19 commitments and tried to provide you with an update. Some of you obviously will be closer to some of these issues and less so in others according to how they fit within your portfolios. But I think you'll see there a fairly positive picture painted of progress that we've made thus far. All of these commitments and pledges are up to date. I'm particularly pleased about the progress made in terms of providing more jobs. It was one of the most important commitments that we were all agreed on, was to try to provide more jobs, trying particularly to focus that effort on trying to provide those higher quality, higher paid jobs, which are so important in terms of taking forward the local economy of the city. Apprenticeships, I know you all highly regard that like I do, and the work that we've done there I think is fairly impressive moving forward. We've been successful in attracting significant jobs from projects that we've been involved with in terms of Citel, as you know, up at Derriford, and soon to be joined by the Range coming at Derriford. But there's also been some other ones. We've had on smaller scales Becton Dickinson that you would have picked up in the local media, and also important Thales based at Turnchapel. I think is a good example of the higher quality jobs that we clearly are looking for, and I think it just demonstrates that by taking that approach that we said that Plymouth is open for business, this is the result that you get. It's hard work. It needs a level of commitment to stick to it. Some you win, some you lose, but you know I appreciate all your support in trying to drive that particular part of the agenda. Notwithstanding Councillor Nicholson's declaration, and I don't think this in any way conflicts you, Patrick, but can I just say to you, in terms of fighting for jobs and investment in the naval base, following our full council meeting last week, I have now written to all South West MPs in Devon and Cornwall to bring them up to date with the situation, together with letters going off to the Prime Minister and the Defence Secretary, and also to the chairman of the local government association as well. So we're trying and get the message out as strongly as we can to wherever we think is an appropriate source. Public health funding on item 3 there. Linda, do you have any particular comments you want to make in that particular area?
Leader, there are things I want to mention when we come to the MTFS and to public health.
You want to pick it up there?
Them.
Yeah, okay, fine. Homes, I know councillors Nicholson and Ricketts have spent a lot of time in terms of trying to drive forward the delivery of homes, and as you can see there, some 850 odd homes have been delivered since May 16, with a lot more in the pipeline moving forward, and that figure will continue to rise. And I think, again, it's one of those issues where you can't be certain until you actually see the spades going in the ground, but the work is going on. And Patrick, do you want to add anything on that?
I wouldn't mind just bringing to Cabinet's attention. I've just come from a topping out ceremony organised by Redrow, celebrating the 10th anniversary and the completion of the vision which affected the reunification of Devonport. So after the Second World War, that tranche of housing that separated Mount Wise from Granby, taken inside the dockyard, now has provided 465 new homes, only 2 to sell, Leader. So that is an achievement. I think we all generally drive around the city, take things for granted, but actually it's not that long ago. There weren't 465 homes there. There were some sheds, nevertheless playing an important role for the dockyard and the Navy. But, you know, there's people, and that's a wonderful achievement. One of our less desirable areas always used to be quoted as one of the poorest areas of deprivation in the country, St Peter's Ward. Now a healthy, rejuvenated and completed scheme. So I think we should pay tribute to all those that have been involved in that. But notwithstanding what you said, Leader, there's huge advances in the next few years, certainly under our agenda for further housing development, providing those vital homes for particularly the young who at the moment aren't on the housing ladder. So I think there's a healthy agenda we've been delivering in the last 18 months, but much more still to do.
Thank you, Patrick. Just reiterate, for this administration, housing and housing delivery is another one of our highest priorities, and we should be working constantly to try to improve that situation going forward from here. As I said, there is a pipeline of projects there that we will be trying to bring forward, obviously, at the earliest opportunity. There's one other area which was something perhaps not quite so high up on the agenda, but we did say that we would try to improve pavements. And I think just draw your attention to actually what's been delivered, which is actually quite amazing. It's been 1,600 square metres of footway resurfacing and 17,500 square metres of footway slurry sealing has been completed. That's an enormous area. I'm not an expert on that, but I'm not sure how we can equate that to numbers of football pitches, but I suspect it's quite a number in terms of surface area. So it's something which we shouldn't lose sight of, because it's an important subject for pedestrians and people out there and about, and perhaps older people where surfaces are not as good as they should be. So it's trying to do what we can in that direction. Cabinet members, you've had a chance to look at this. Does anyone want to make any further comments about any of these progress reports? Okay, Councillor Downey, I'll go down the line if I can then.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Just a quick update really on number 15, which is the littering strategy for Plymouth. Colleagues, you will be very much aware that we pride ourselves on being a listening council here. But there's no point listening unless we actually act. So our residents have told us that they are very concerned at the inconsiderate behaviour of some people littering in the city centre and obviously our suburbs as well. Therefore, having had this issue identified by Residents' Leader and by ourselves as a responsible authority, now is the time to act. So we are committed to keeping Plymouth clean by tackling the scourge of not only littering, but fly posting, fly tipping, and by challenging those who allow their dogs to foul green spaces and streets. To this end, Leader, I am currently investigating a number of ways to do this, and at the next Cabinet meeting on the 28th of November, I will bring forward proposals to increase the number of enforcement officers out on our streets. They will be committed to targeting people whose actions, such as littering, fly tipping or fly posting, are not acceptable in our city. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Downey. I think we're all looking forward to this piece of work that you've been doing, I know, for some time now. So I look forward, and I'm sure colleagues will, to the details of this coming shortly when you're ready with them. So thank you very much for doing this piece of work. It's an important piece of work. Councillor Darcy?
Thank you, Leader. I will be discussing the MTFS later in the agenda, so I'll keep the excitement for everybody in check with regards to the financial reports. I know everybody enjoys those reports. But I share your enthusiasm, and it's very pleasing to see that these commitments are on track and some achieved, despite the challenging times we are operating in as a local authority and the increasing pressures across the local authority as we continue trying to transform our service offering. These are difficult and very challenging times, so it's very encouraging to see that we are on track with our commitments and, as I say, some achieved. But I'll save the financial aspect until later.
Thank you, Councillor Darcy. Does anybody else want to? Right. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, while we're celebrating looking at our progress report for our pledges, I think we should have a special pat on the back for the members and officers who have completed their task under Pledge 19. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those few words of self-congratulation, Councillor Riley. I was going to say, in credit to you, you took this commitment on to look at the committee system, and you had the courage in the part as moving that process forward to recognise there was a solution here, and you took that solution. But to your credit, you've now developed via as the chair of the Constitution Review Group a further and perhaps arguably even a more important piece of work around how we engage with people in local communities and how we do our carry out our neighbourhood policies and stuff like that. And I know you're driving that through. So all credit to you for recognising where you were going or weren't with the initial project, but having the initiative to sort of divert that into a further productive line of work. So thank you for that. Councillor Jordan.
Yes, I'm going to say on item 7 with the hotel after the Quality Inn, I'm going to say this is just another example of business trust and investment in the city, which is going to help with the boost of our tourist economy. And with 2020 just round the corner, I'm going to say this is just more proof of the opportunities that we've got, that this is going to be the launch pad that's going to put Plymouth back on the international stage.
Sorry. The project isn't quite over the line yet, as you're aware, but we are getting now close to bringing it to successful conclusion. So thank you for that. Councillor Leaves.
Yes, Leader. I just want to touch on, since we implemented alternative weekly collection, our recycling rate's gone up over 6% in the period. Now we've reached a target of 38.62 for 3 months to June this year. I think it's the highest target we've ever achieved in recycling in the city. So I think it's a good thing for that. And we're still increasing. And we're well on the way to our target for 2020. I want to say that I'm sorry, but the last day of the day for the Western Mill Recycling Centre is going to be closed. But it will reopen on the 1st of December with 200,000 spent on it to upgrade it for the public around the area. So that's another good news for recycling. We provide all new litter bins across the city, some recycling as well in some city centres, and that is also recycling, increasing our recycling rate as well. And we've rearranged the collection on these to make sure we're cleaner. We've got some with the sensors in it so they know when they're full, so we're timing ourselves now to know when they need to be emptied. With your help, we provided more staff this last couple of months, 21 team, to go around and clean the city up a bit more again, clean all the weeds out, which has never been done before. They've been left before. Now we're going and digging them up and redoing them right through. So, Leader, our pledge was a green and cleaner city, and I think we've been achieving that at the moment in time. We're getting there.
Thank you, Councillor Leaves. I don't think we should underestimate the scale of the challenge that you've been working with over the last few months. This has been a major change as we move to alternate waste weekly collections. We recognise that there will always be some teething troubles with a project of this sort of scale, but you've stuck to it, and I think the evidence that you're now able to show us around an increased recycling rate is the sort of evidence, if you like, that to show that the decision was the right decision for Plymouth. And I think that's the key criteria here. So thank you for your efforts in that direction. Councillor Ricketts, have you anything you wish to add? No? Right. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Leader. It covers a couple of our pledges, and that's really the strategic transport links with the city. We hear a lot in the press about the Peninsula Rail Task Force, but we mustn't forget, actually, there's our Chief Executive who's the lead officer for that group. And this authority continues to press government for an adequate solution to our asks in the offer that was presented, or asks that were presented. So that agenda still continues, so would hope, Leader, through you, that the wider public recognise that the pressure is still on the government in terms of rail links. For strategic road links, obviously we're all unfortunately suffering from the pain of implementation of the Derriford Transport Scheme, but I think it's worth just emphasising that the considerable growth in housing that's anticipated in this city, unless we actually put these strategic infrastructure schemes in on our highway, then we'll have gridlock throughout the city in a few years' time. So whilst it is painful while they're implemented, they are absolutely essential to the long-term sustainability of our city as we continue to grow. But we are generally trying to mitigate and minimise the impact to the travelling public. But clearly, they're multi-million-pound schemes, and there are a number of other schemes in the pipeline, including Forder Valley, through a very good recent announcement. But we will do our very best to keep the public moving. And I think it is worth just emphasising on the airport, because we touch on the joint local plan as one of our priorities, that this administration is absolutely 100% committed to retaining the airport site for airport use. And I was only reading the Herald only a couple of nights ago, Leader, where somebody dismissed the council's efforts in respect of aviation activity in the city. That can be further from the truth. We have ploughed significant resources and effort into defending that position and policy position in the joint local plan. So on all fronts, from strategic connectivity, this City Council is doing absolutely as much as it possibly can to give the choice to the travelling public of rail, road or aviation.
Thank you, Patrick. I certainly endorse what you would say there. I think it's important that we continue to make this point, and I did so on local radio recently, that people have to understand that this is an ambitious city and we have an ambitious growth agenda. The city is growing, and in order for us to provide the jobs and the opportunities and all the infrastructure that is required to deliver a 21st century economy, we have to have a 21st century infrastructure. If you can't have one without the other, and they are inextricably linked. So, as I said, we accept that in certain cases there will be a level of disruption, and that's just the nature of the beast that we're dealing with. But I do strongly suggest to everyone here that there is a short-term pain but longer-term gain. And what we're looking for now, and I referred to it earlier on, is getting those high-quality, higher-paid jobs into the city in greater numbers, so that those students that currently at school now have opportunities here in the city, should they wish to take them up, and on the local doorstep, so that we sort of lever up the quality of the local economy so as to provide jobs and opportunities for all. And that's really what it's about. So as with everything, it's easy to focus on the short-term, immediate problem lying absolutely in front of your face, but sometimes you have to lift your eyes a bit higher to the horizon and look on a wider scope there. So I absolutely agree with what you're saying. So, colleagues, that's the state of play where we are at the moment. That's no excuse for any complacency. I need that make that absolutely clear to you. I want you all please to keep driving on, working with officers and everyone else within your portfolio to continue to drive forward this agenda. It's important as we move forward. So can I please ask you to accept the report that you have in front of you? Yes? Thank you very much. So we can now move on to the much awaited report, Councillor Darcy, I think you were trying to say to us earlier on, which is the medium-term financial strategy. Would you like to say a few words?
Well, I'm sure you'll be delighted that you tempered your enthusiasm just for that short period. We've now arrived at the agenda item. Thank you, Leader. I will briefly introduce this item. And I thank Paul and others who are in attendance today. Andrew Hardingham cannot make it today. He's away on annual leave. Leaders, Cabinet members will know for a number of years it has been challenging for the Council to continue to set a balanced and sustainable budget each year. Service demand pressures continue to escalate, adding more pressure to future budgets, and in particular in adult and children's social care. Despite using the adult social care precept and the increased Better Care Fund allocations, this is still not enough to cover the increased cost burden of the national living wage and demand costs for demographic growth. In the period of 2016-17 to 2019-20, we are anticipating additional costs of some 19.3 million, against additional funding of 15.3 million, a financial gap of some 4 million, which will only increase in the future. Within children's services, whilst the number of looked after children has remained relatively steady, there has been an increase to the cost of placements and a region-wide shortage for placements, which necessitated the use of residential care rather than the preferred fostering placements at a much higher cost. In addition, there are still a number of high-cost individual packages of care due to the needs of young people. Whilst having to deal with the service demand increases, Plymouth is facing unprecedented funding cuts. The Council's core funding from government, the Revenue Support Grant, is projected to fall from £23 million in 2017 to £5.5 million in 2020-21. In the current financial year, £18 million of savings were required to set a balanced budget, and a further £37 million of efficiencies will be required over the next 3 years. Plymouth is and must be prepared for these financial challenges. It must ensure it gets a balance right between implementing efficiencies and new ways of working and being innovative in addressing the reduction in the resources available to fund essential local services. Leader, that is why a robust medium-term financial strategy is required to support the Council in meeting these challenges, and it is central to the way the Council manages its finances over the next 3 years. As a key strategic document, the medium-term financial strategy links the revenue budget and the capital programme and the Treasury management strategy. It is a central document for our financial planning and ensures the budget is prepared in line with Plymouth's priorities. The plan sets out the national context and the Council's assumptions on resources over the next 3 years. Additional costs have been identified and built into the base budget, and proposed savings identified to offset the budget gap. As part of the budget process, we will consult widely. There has been engagement with the business community already, and local residents and members will be aware of the Budget Scrutiny Select Committee have received, considered and discussed an early version of the MTFS in September. We welcome full engagement with all members on the budget. The Budget Scrutiny Select Committee made a number of recommendations at their meeting in September. Officers and members will provide further details responding to these recommendations at future Select Committee meetings. A considerable amount of work has been undertaken to date to get to this stage with the medium-term financial strategy and setting out the challenges Plymouth faces. The latest position is a £4.7 million budget gap. More work will be required over the coming months to address this gap and ensure the Council sets a balanced budget in February 2018. The MTFS also sets out the Council's significant and ambitious capital investment programme. This will help to grow the city and support the local economy. The Council has agreed a priority list of projects that we want to develop over the next 5 years and a capital programme of £691 million of investment up to 2021 and 22 financial years, including investment in the road infrastructure, transport links such as Ford Valley Link Road, the Asset Investment Fund and the Box, just to name a few. In summary, Leader, I present the medium-term financial strategy to Cabinet and I recommend the MTFS is presented to Council on the 20th of November 2017. Additionally, in light of the demands within children's and adult social care, I also recommend the Leader writes to the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government to express the Council's concern about the availability of resources for social care and request additional funding for adults and children's services as part of the local government finance settlement. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Darcy, for introducing the medium-term financial strategy. I'm conscious that Paul Luby, Head of Financial Planning and Reporting, has joined us this afternoon. Paul, do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you, Leader. I think Councillor Darcy covered all the main points. I hope the only thing to add really is I hope that the document is an easy read, it's a good read, there's a degree of technical financial analysis in here, but I certainly hope that you're able to read it and understand the financial issues, and hopefully scrutiny will also receive it well when they next review it, I think in January.
Thank you, Paul. Questions? Councillor Linda Bowyer.
Okay. Chair, this report sets out our financial position in the medium term, and I will cover headline messages for public health and strategic cooperative commissioning. For 2017-18, the public health grant is £15.735 million, which is a reduction of £0.398 million from 2016-17. We do not have a confirmed grant allocation for 18-19 at this stage. And for planning purposes, Plymouth's Director of Public Health is working on an assumed reduction of a further 2.5%, which provide a grant value of £15.342 million. Since 2014-15, Plymouth's allocation will have seen a cumulative reduction of more than £2 million, nearly 12%. This grant may only be spent on activities which may purpose to the improved public health of our local community population. This includes some specific requirements around health improvement, sexual health, drug and alcohol services, children and young people's public health services, NHS health checks and health protection, as well as providing healthcare public health advice to support the commissioning of health and wellbeing services. Despite the reducing funding, we have consistently come in on budget each year, and I will advise Cabinet colleagues as soon as the 18-19 grant is confirmed. Moving on to strategic commissioning, I have reported on several occasions that adult social care is facing unprecedented pressure in line with other authorities across the country. As this is happening at the same time as our overall budget funding is reducing, it is therefore important to note the additional funding being allocated to the service. A significant proportion of our revenue budget is spent on two main areas: adult care services and children's social care provision. Nationally and locally, the cost of providing health and wellbeing services are rising as demand increases. We have an ageing population with more complex needs and higher levels of young children requiring our services. The national living wage was increased to £7.50 per hour in April 2017. This increase in costs is shown separately in our additional costs analysis, and in reality is a key driver in the increasing cost of providing our adult social care packages and services. The budget has provided £1.6 million in 17-18, and increases in each year as we move towards the government's pledge of £9 per hour in 2021. For demographic growth, we have provided an additional £2.813 million in 18-19 and increasing to £1.861 million in 2021. In total, this is additional resources of £5.117 million next year. The team are looking at all ways of driving out savings and efficiencies, and we have to make a saving of £2.105 million or 27% next year to contribute to the overall £7.555 million savings. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Some grim statistics. We'll come back to that perhaps in a moment if I can. Councillor Mrs. Beer.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to respond regarding children, young people, families, education, participation and skills. I'd like to advise Cabinet colleagues of the following headlines in relation to two areas that are in my remit. That's the children, young people, families, education, participation and skills. A significant proportion of our revenue budget is spent on children's social provision. Nationally and locally, the costs of providing such health and wellbeing services are rising in demand, and the demand increases. We have higher levels of children requiring our services. We also have a responsibility for the education of our young people. The largest specific grant that the Council receives is the Dedicated Schools Grant, which in total is over £180 million for 2017-18. We have discussed the new funding formula in previous meetings, and although the funding allocations for 2018-19 have been released, the team is still working through the detail and will update colleagues once we have a full picture. For children's social care, we undertake cost and volume analysis, which is refreshed on a quarterly basis. In 2017-18 was the first year of additional funding was allocated to reflect the increase of the total number of children looked after. The further additional funding allocated in future years reflects a levelling out in the trend of the number of children coming into care and an increase in the cost of care packages and placements. The numbers reflected for 2019-20 and 2020-21 are based on trend analysis at this stage and will be refined going forward. The additional funding for 2018-19 is 2 million. Within children, young people and families, a savings target of 1.263 million is in place for the next year. In the education, participation and skills, a saving target of 421,000 is in place. In terms of how these savings are to be achieved, we are extending the Gateway offer to widen support for children, young people, families, and supporting the coordination of improved early help offer. Remodelling our special educational needs, that's SEND, services across the system to deliver a joined-up approach, making use of mobile working and technology. Revising our transitions offer to help develop a seamless support. Extending the permanency team to widen the support for children in care, delivering sustainable offer across the city. Developing an improved quality assurance service for our young people. Embedding our new ways of working across children's social care, which will make use of mobile working to deliver timely assessments and support for our young children in need. Reviewing and remodelling the services for education, participation and skills to develop a partnership approach working with schools to improve our offer to students and parents across the city. A report on plans for the department and options for the future was taken to the Wellbeing and Overview and Scrutiny Committee last week and will be able to update colleagues shortly. I just want to touch on briefly on Torbay Children's Services because that's a contractual arrangement. At this stage, we have a unanimous in-principle agreement from the full council and are currently planning the financial and other due diligence required ahead of the full decision in January 2018, which will go before full council. The establishment and running of the contract would be at no cost to Plymouth City Council, and there would be no pooling or cross-subsidy of Torbay Council budgets. The set-up costs will be covered by a one-off payment from the Department of Education. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Terry. I'll come back to the issue both flagged up, funding pressures. Is there anyone else who wants to make a comment? No? Right. Just picking up this issue about funding pressures. I mean, I was looking through and I see that for 18-19, Ian, you're flagging up potential increased costs of some £11 million. And when I looked at that in a little bit more detail, I see just over 7 million of that 11 million is down to increased costs with children's services, with adult social care, and with the impact of the national living wage. So that's some 60% of our current forecast extra cost for next year, accounted for by just those three items. And I think that perhaps does just flag up the level of pressures that we're facing. This is going to inevitably lead to some difficult decisions, but you know, we've been here before, and I'm confident that we will find a solution to this. But you're absolutely right to flag up these ongoing pressures. Somebody did make a call for us to write to the appropriate Secretary of State. That was you, Ian, I think, wasn't it? Will somebody second that proposal? Yeah, but thank you very much. Are we all agreed we should do that? Yes. Yep, fine. Will you perhaps just allow me then to work with the Chief Executive and perhaps with Carol and other directors to try and find a suitable form of wording to capture what you've all been describing this afternoon. So, if we are happy at that, then can I just go back to the recommendations?
Sorry, Lee.
Do you want to say something? Patrick?
Just on the timing of that letter, given the fact the budget is imminent, can we get the letter off as sooner on than later, so that a bit of pressure before the budget's announced?
Yeah, budget, I think, is my memory, is the 22nd of November. Yeah. Okay, so the recommendations then, can I bring you to this then, are that we should approve on Ian's recommendation the medium-term financial strategy, and we recommend it to full council on the 20th of November. And the second recommendation will be that we write to the Secretary of State to just highlight our concerns over mounting funding pressures around those three areas in particular that I've highlighted. Are we all agreed? Yep. Thank you very much. Right. So if we move on to the next item on the agenda, this is the Director of Public Health's annual report for 2017, and Councillor Linda Bowyer, can I ask you please to introduce this item?
Thank you, Leader. Leader, it's a great pleasure to introduce the Director of Public Health's annual report. The annual report has focused on Thrive Year 2, which was working with schools. I'm sure our Director will be happy to talk through her report and answer any questions from members. I'd like to pick up from the earlier agenda, and I would briefly like to tell you of Year 4 of Thrive Plymouth, which we launched earlier this month. And I'm particularly pleased this year we are focusing on mental well-being. Mental well-being is fundamental to us as individuals to help us to be at our best, to be happy and healthy, but it's also so important for our city and communities too. I'm very excited about the potential we have in the coming year to make a step change for mental well-being and health. I am very aware of the challenges that our local people face in terms of looking after their health and well-being. I'm also very conscious of the influence that a local authority can have through fulfilling its functions on helping to improve the health and well-being of their citizens. Thrive Plymouth is about bringing together all parts of our local community to focus on positive choices for better health in a growing city. It is our social movement to collectively address the health and well-being challenges of our local people, and it's about enabling and supporting everyone to make small changes in order to do this. The local authority has an obvious leadership role in Thrive Plymouth. We must actively play our part in order to have credibility in asking others to act alongside us. I was delighted that the City Council at their meeting on the 27th of September agreed to sign up to the Mental Health Challenge for local authorities. This challenge is a national initiative that asks local authorities to publicly commit to promoting mental health across their business and to recognise the key role they have in improving mental health in their communities. In signing up to the challenge, we recognise the impact that mental well-being, health and illness has on our local people. The relationship between mental health and physical health, housing, employment, debt, education, crime, and the potential for us to influence these determinants in our role in improving the mental health of everyone in our communities and in tackling inequality in health. All councillors can play a positive role in championing mental health on an individual and strategic basis, and I am pleased to say that I will be taking up the role of member mental health champion, and that Sarah Lees from our public health team will be undertaking the role of lead officer. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Bowyer. We obviously wish you well in that role, a very important role. It's an area where I think we're all aware has risen up the agenda in a pretty dramatic way in recent months, and quite rightly so. So we wish you well there. I'm also delighted to welcome Ruth Harrell, who's our Director of Public Health. Ruth, do you have anything else you would like to add?
Thank you. I'd just like to say that it is a great pleasure to be here to be able to present to you my first annual report. And you'll be very aware, I know, that this is all about Thrive Plymouth, which is our city's campaign to tackle health inequalities across the city. And I'm very, very aware that public health at its best is about collaboration. And so I'm delighted to be able to, in my annual report, recognise the work that's been going on with, across our partners, and in particular, this is around the work that schools have been doing to promote the health and well-being of their children. We know that there's a virtuous cycle between health and well-being in children and then being able to do well at school and to be able to attain well, and that then influences both the choices that they make through their lives and also the health and well-being outcomes that they then achieve as adults. So it is really, really important. And I hope that in the report you will have seen some of the excellent examples we've got. And actually we are spoilt for choice in terms of the examples to put in the report. You will be aware that our joint strategic needs assessment, which is all available online, does look at the epidemiological aspects of health and well-being, and it does pull out those challenges that we have across the city. And I've very deliberately chosen to focus on the positives. And I do think that is extremely important, because this is about challenging us to do more, yes, but also celebrating the success that we have had and supporting schools in carrying on the work that they are doing. I was also wanting to just flag the fact that, as Councillor Mrs Barrow was very able to describe, that we have recently launched Year 4 of Thrive Plymouth, and this is so important that we're looking at well-being, and this was highlighted in the annual Director of Public Health report through the surveys that we're doing in schools as well, that emotional well-being and mental well-being is very important for children and also for adults. So we are looking very much forward to Year 4 of Thrive Plymouth and really embedding that. I think that's all I wanted to say, but very happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you, Ruth. Colleagues, any questions, comments? Councillor Jordan.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, it was just a few comments I wanted to pick out of it. I'm going to say the fact that the last time this survey was done was, what, 2 years ago? And we've managed to get an extra 600 young people surveyed this time. So it just shows that more young people are buying into it. But some of the things that I think are absolutely fantastic, that 91% of Year 5s have improved their swimming due to the 3 weeks free swimming that is provided for them as part of the curriculum. And I know young people shouldn't be drinking and smoking, but there's been a significant drop in both of those areas as well compared to what there was 2 years ago. I think is also good. And the fact that we're maintaining 2/3 of young people are still exercising, I just shows that the team, and I think we need to send our thanks back to the team for their hard work, that we're actually driving in the right direction, we're actually getting on top of these issues, and hopefully we will get down to a level where we haven't got young people smoking and we haven't got young people drinking unless it's in a controlled environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Ruth, do you have any comments or just want to note what Councillor Jordan has highlighted there?
To note, and as you say, there are encouragingly small numbers that are reporting any exposure to smoking and drinking, but as you say, yep, we want to drive that down even further.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Mrs Beer?
I think I'd just like to add that we should be singing the praises of Plymouth. We are doing very well with our health and well-being, mental health and well-being for our young people in the schools across the city. And we've got an excellent offer. I don't think we pat ourselves on the back enough for that. And I think that the offer we have in our senior schools is outstanding at the moment. There's room for improvement, as always. But, you know, we need to be singing those praises because we do work really hard in mental health. And I think we probably are a lead city in that.
Thank you, Terry. Councillor Darcy.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to make 3 very quick points. I very much concur with Councillor Jordan. The direction of travel articulated through this report is very encouraging, and it's about time that we saw the right direction of travel, and it's important that we herald those successes and acknowledge those. I too would like to compliment you on the report. It was a very easy report to read, and reports are often very dull, certainly in my world. So it was a very easy report to read, and the key information was readily available. And thirdly, just congratulations to you and through Councillor Mrs Boyer, doing a great job in terms of public health. And, you know, as I said, direction of travel is great, so long may it continue.
Thank you, Ian. One of the challenges that Ruth put to us through the recommendations was to offer any suggestions as to how this report could be disseminated in the most effective way. I'm aware, Ruth, that our policy and performance team are producing ward profiles. Are you able to have input into that? Have you been consulted? Because I'm thinking that's one way that that could be that could help you to get the message out there. But do you have any intention of producing a sort of a précis and an executive summary of the report that we could perhaps issue via social media, for instance, to try and make contact with younger people who predominantly tend to use social media?
Yes, absolutely. We are working up plans for that. At the moment, we've done some comms, but we haven't explicitly tailored it to that age group. But we are doing that. We have some work that we did through this Thrive Plymouth year that will help us to do that and understand what the issues are and how to make them appeal to those younger people. So yes, we will be doing that. Thank you.
Councillor Darcy, you want to come back?
Yeah, can I just push a little further on your question, Leader? I mean, could we not push and disseminate this further afield again? I mean, earlier you mentioned in the agenda, it's important that we encourage the right level of entrepreneurialism in Plymouth and generate more good quality GVA jobs and encourage more families to relocate and settle in this wonderful city that we all enjoy living and working within. And this is a good story. This is another example of how Plymouth is doing better than other regions or other cities in the country. So it's right that we should shout about it locally, but a criticism of Plymouth is we often sit on our successes and we don't share our success stories. And I think this is one of those that we should be shouting from the rooftops and a much wider audience to encourage those people to relocate down to Plymouth and help grow our economy accordingly.
I suppose it's an issue, really, Ruth. How do you try to communicate within the public health world then, and how could you do that and try to reach an audience outside of the city as well as inside the city?
In terms of public health colleagues, we've actually been asked to do a seminar for other public health teams across the country on Thrive Plymouth and the way it has been working is it is beginning to be recognised as being the right way to try to tackle these kinds of issues. So that's very positive. And I take your point on board about how do we promote the benefits of schools that are signed up to the Healthy Child Quality Mark, workplaces that are signed up to workplace wellbeing as well. How do we promote that to a wider audience? I will take that one away and have a think about it.
And the only other thing I can think of on the Thrive Plymouth agenda, have we ever shared any of that work and the impact we think of that work with the LGA?
There was a report a little while ago, probably about 18 months, that highlighted that, but it's certainly something we could pursue, actually. Yes, that would be a good time to do that. Yeah.
Right. You'll see then, colleagues, there are 3 recommendations. I'm not going to read them out. You can, you've got them in front of you. Can I ask you, please, then, to offer your support for those recommendations? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you, Ruth. Right, let's move on. It's the Plan for Education business case. That must mean Councillor Terry Beer.
Thank you, Leader. The Plan for Education guides the strategic ambition and direction of the City Council in respect of education. It covers everything from how we will improve standards to the capital investment we are likely to need. The purpose of this document is to set out the options for the future shape of education, participation, skills department in the light of government policy, council strategy and statutory requirements placed on the department. The local authority still has a key role to play in education, but it is so different to the one that we undertook historically that we need to change radically our approach. The paper you have received details the work undertaken with schools to date across the City of Plymouth to test their support for a partnership approach. 70% of schools have agreed in principle to develop a more detailed business case which will be prepared over the coming months. This will define the scope and delivery of the vehicle to achieve partnership to establish with schools to run with the majority of services currently within Education Participation and Skills Department. Educational standards over recent years in Plymouth have shown some variation. However, in general, attainment has been below average for all at Key Stage, and by the end of Key Stage 4, results remain below the national average in terms of attainment and progress. At post-16, the percentage of pupils achieving 3 or more A-levels, grades A to E, is also below the national average. The new agreement would secure a long-term commitment to schools and to support the work of the Plymouth Education Board in raising aspiration and attainment of the city. This has gone before scrutiny, and we do have some outline draft recommendations, but it will keep returning back to scrutiny. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Beer. Welcome to Judith Harwood. Welcome, Judith, our Assistant Director for Education, Participation and Skills. Do you want to add more to that which Councillor Mrs Beer has highlighted, Judith?
Only really briefly, which is just to underline the point that the Plan for Education is a comprehensive piece of work which does cover standards, building, place planning, a number of features, and of course health and well-being, and a strong link to what we've just heard about health and well-being in schools. So this particular aspect is really trying to get the building blocks in place, an infrastructure which is actually transformational in terms of the way that education departments used to work. And we would bring our statutory functions together in one place so that following developments with integrated commissioning that we've seen over the last few years through integrated health and wellbeing programmes, we'd also look at integrated delivery. The intention being that if we're going to support a school improvement system that's actually very diverse now, then we would do well to bring all the component parts together to have one coherent conversation.
Thank you, Judith. Colleagues, any questions for Judith or Terry? Right, Councillor Michael Leaves.
Yes, only a quick one, Leader. Will integration address standards?
And it is the intention that by certainly through part of the Plan for Education, which is how we bring an education board together, which we've made a start on, that people can look together at where our greatest challenges are, and we can exploit the resources we've got. We've already heard from a number of Cabinet members today about the challenges through the MTFS. So it's really about how we make the best use of the resource to bring things together, but also that we have one conversation with each other about the challenges, and we coordinate those challenges. And we believe that through this Plan for Education, the partnership element, then we've got a much better chance of there being one conversation and effective resolution to the challenges being brought to the issue, rather than a whole host of well-meaning but not always the same facing aspirations about how we're going to deal with things.
Thank you, Judith. Councillor Jordan.
I think this is probably to Judith as well. How are you going to get all the schools to buy into this? How's it going to appeal to all schools, especially with so many of them now being academies?
Well, we've been really heartened by the conversations. We've been running engagement sessions for quite a long time now. And what schools recognise is that there is one agenda, and that is better outcomes for children. And so whether you're an academy or a maintained school, everybody wants to look at the question of standards, they want to look at inclusion, they want to look at health and well-being, attendance. They want to look at that really with one city-wide piece of intelligence, rather than, as I say, you know, some myths sometimes, but also everybody's different perceptions of the issue. We won't necessarily get absolutely everybody to buy in the same way. But the fact that in 5 or 6 months of working with schools, we've got to a position of 70% being very interested in pursuing this partnership, that's a really good indication. it's more than enough with which to move forward. And I think the other issue, of course, is that some schools would like to work with this partnership in a trading capacity. They'd like to purchase services from it. They'd like to have the quality assurance of those services in one place. But for some, they don't want to buy the services. They just want to be part of a coherent approach to something that feels quite fragmented for them at times. Some schools actually feel really isolated.
Thank you, Judith. I've got Councillor Riley next.
Hi, Judith. Yes, thank you very much. I was just going to ask, have you identified any risks in this partnership? And if you have, could you just outline them for us, please?
Well, clearly, one of the risks is that our statutory functions change again significantly. We're trying to mitigate that risk by making sure that the partnership has got a degree of agility and flexibility built into it. But we do have to recognise that change will be inevitable. I think the other risk is possibly there, just Councillor Jordan's point, that a number of schools will, as they join larger multi-academy trusts, will say, what is the relevance of this partnership? So we have to start off with the right principles in place about how collaboration can bring far better improvement, more rapid improvement to the whole system. So it's really, the partnership is about a system change rather than just a new company, something that could be emperor's new clothes. So we're building in that resilience to change and the sustainability elements. In some respects, one of the greatest risks is that if we do get to the point that in principle decisions by schools to move forward doesn't move forward to a full partnership, then we will have to look at how we change the way we operate and reduce some of our statutory functions to a really core and basic level. And that means that we'll be removing the insurance policy for schools, because at the moment we help them to meet a large amount of unplanned need through the work that we do.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Bowyer.
Actually, my question was very similar to Councillor Riley, so...
Right, okay, fine. Councillor Darcy.
Thank you, Leader. Judith, you just touched off it at the end of your response to the previous question in terms of what options are available if we do not go with the preferred option, the plan B, and that I guess is just statutory requirements. What are your thoughts on that, if that is the option B, or is that the option B? What's plan B?
We did start out with 5 options, and we went through due diligence on each of them, and obviously through the engagement with schools as well. Option 4 was the one that you see recommended to you. One of the options was Plan B, it was option 3, it just happened to be called, and that was really a reduction in the services that the local authority offers, so that the response to our statutory functions is of a minimum nature. I can give you an example. At the moment, we discharge our safeguarding function with schools through some really quite comprehensive meetings, newsletters, discussion fora, and it's quite robust. We also investigate all concerns and complaints around safeguarding in schools directly and actively. And obviously, under something that looked like a really basic core function, then all we would do is send out maybe a newsletter twice a year saying these are the policy changes in safeguarding. And then we know that schools struggle sometimes to keep on top of those things, and there'll be nowhere locally for them to go and seek advice. So if you take something like safeguarding, which obviously is absolutely up here in terms of our priority, then we believe that supporting schools more actively actually leads to better outcomes and a safer system for everyone.
If I may, Leader, yeah, I think it follows on from the paper we've talked about earlier in terms of that connection between Thrive Plymouth and how we can foster that. I should have said at the beginning of my question, I had the pleasure, we were shown around your department on a recent visit when we had our last cabinet meeting, and I was quite surprised and impressed with how small your department was in terms of the work that comes out of it. So I was quite taken aback by how small a team it is there and the work that's produced in that department.
Thank you, Ian. Okay. I mean, I think this is a bold initiative. We're trying to address some issues which I think Councillor Beer has quite rightly highlighted around educational attainment. But be under no illusions. I mean, we are in this report being asked to note that there is a significant budget requirement for the next financial year. It's highlighted there at £9.2 million. But I personally think this is a piece of work that we really do have to drive forward. I think our track record in terms of partnership working in this council over a significant number of years now is fairly impressive. I think, and it has demonstrated, I think, that by working together to try to solve a common problem, you can always tend to be far more effective than trying to work in isolation. So I would ask that you look at those 3 recommendations there and support them today. I think it's the right thing to do, and you know what we want to see is an increase in those attainment levels to try to provide, if you like, that skilled workforce for the future, which is so important and so dependent. All our fortunes rest on it ultimately at the end of the day, don't they? So, colleagues, are you happy to support the 3 recommendations? Yes, that's unanimous, so thank you for that, Judith and Terry. Right, the final item this afternoon is the business case for community health, well-being and special needs and SEND support, services integration. Bit of a mouthful, and I'm going to ask Joe if once councillors Mrs Bowyer and Mrs Beer have introduced the report, if you could put a more flesh on the bones for us, please, Joe. Right, who's going to start? Councillor Mrs Bowyer?
Beer.
Right, okay.
Right, here we go. The business case to be considered by Cabinet today sets out the proposed direction of travel in community health, wellbeing and SEND services in Plymouth. The business case covers a range of services, including health promotion through health visiting, school nursing, along with services for children with additional needs through the SEND, CAMS and Child Development Centre. The business case also includes services currently provided in-house by Plymouth City Council services commissioned by Public Health and services commissioned by the new Devon CCG. The Council's ambition is to integrate these services to create a collaborative model to support the city's vulnerable children, which leads to a better experience and outcome for families. The 3 current providers of the service plan to work together over the next 18 months to improve working practices and pathways as part of the journey towards integration. The business case explains that procurement is needed in line with regulations to cover some of the services in scope, so that the new contract is in place by the 1st of April 2019. This procurement process will be carried out by the new Devon CCG with input from Plymouth City Council to ensure it meets the needs and ensure that progress towards integration is maintained. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Terry. Councillor Mrs Bowyer, do you want to add anything?
I think Councillor Mrs Beer has covered most of what I was thinking of.
Fine, thank you. So, Joe, do you want to add further to that?
Thank you. I'll just add briefly, really, to highlight the commitment and importance from Plymouth's point of view over improving outcomes for young people with SEND and with additional complex health needs as well. That this proposal that's set out in the paper is really reflecting an ongoing commitment as a city to be constantly looking for the way that we can improve the way that services work together. And at the heart of that has been around listening to family stories and their experience of the way that they access the support services that they say make a difference to being able to meet the needs of their children in the city. So the proposal is setting out a next step in that development, and we will look at it being an important part of the way in which services who are providing that support plan together to be supporting families, so that it responds to families' requests that they don't experience the difficulties of navigating or their way around important services. The integration brings that service together, and that we're then asking families to make use of those services where I'm not explaining this well, so let me just start again. What we're asking is services to work together so that when families approach and young people approach asking for support, we plan together how that response is delivered. So making that happen needs a phased approach. And what we're setting out in this paper is that phased approach will start with us organising our services together, thinking about the access points for families, thinking about the way in which we draw down those services of support. For the support agencies in the city doing that together, we'll then get a better understanding of what makes a difference, where we can see improved outcomes for children, and how in the future we would be deploying those resources to have better outcomes. That's important for young people with SEND and additional complex health needs, because what we know in the city, as is nationally, that we see a growing complexity of need and we see new areas of need emerging that we need to be able to respond to as a system so that families get the right support at the right time and that it's response that makes a difference to their lives. Emma, I wanted to just give the opportunity if there's any additional questions from the procurement question that you wanted to raise.
So, hello, I'm the Strategic Commissioning Manager with responsibility for children and young people. So Joe and I have worked very closely on this. It was really to say that the procurement is necessary of the services currently provided by Live Well South West, but we want as commissioners to make sure we don't do anything to derail the journey towards integration that's already begun. The work of the 3 current providers has been very positive, and as Joe has said, very much driven by feedback from children and our families, and we want to build upon that. So we will be ensuring as part of the procurement that there is a very strong focus on partnership working and on continuing that journey. So we won't allow a procurement to derail the positive work that's already gone on.
Thank you. Cabinet, any questions? No, you're all happy. Can I just check with you on the point you made about you won't let the procurement process derail anything? I mean, that's absolutely crucial. We can't sort of, upset the apple cart in that. So, I mean, how specifically are you going to guard against anything going wrong as part of that procurement process?
It's a very big question, isn't it? We have a team working on this. We're working very closely with our partners in the CCG. Public health, obviously, are very, very involved in this. And we are just making sure we've got the right brains on this and we think this through carefully. We are also, this procurement is being led by the CCG, but we are a separate lot within that. So there's a Plymouth-specific bit of the tender, which gives us the ability to be able to shape that for our local requirements. And we will be all over that. I know Carol won't let us do anything but that, so we'll be very careful. It is about the attention to detail and making sure that we continue that golden thread of what Joe was describing throughout, through the tender paperwork, through the evaluation, through into the contract award, and ultimately into contract monitoring. So we just need to continue this throughout every stage of this process.
Okay, I'm sure you will be all over it, but you'll forgive us for just testing that with you because that's so important. Councillor Darcy, did you want to come in?
Yes, for my leader, you've highlighted in your report any potential delays in the implementation, and I note that that will affect savings to be achieved in respect of that, and you have put some mitigation in. But in terms of confidence, I mean, that is a significant risk. Are we satisfied that we have sufficient mitigation in order to avoid that? Because the efficiency savings must be delivered.
If you're first, I'll come in.
We've thought hard around the pace of change for this, and we've really tested out the commitment across the agencies who are involved in this, in bringing this service together, to be thinking about the barriers that each agency might face in moving forward, the way in which resources are deployed. And yes, that is well tested and will be monitored through a project executive approach with those agencies working together so that we keep pace behind the change that needs to be achieved.
All right. Anyone else got any comments they want to make? Right, let's move to the recommendations there. Then you'll see there are three. You are asked to approve the operational and strategic direction of travel here. You're asked to understand, acknowledge that a procurement exercise will be necessary, and also agree that some more formal options for a longer-term partnership working can be researched and considered for possible implementation from potentially 2019 onwards. Are you all happy to accept and support those recommendations? That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Joe, Judith, and sorry, I didn't catch Emma. Right, yeah, Emma. Thank you very much indeed for your input there. Appreciate that. Thank you. Right, colleagues, that's the end of this afternoon's agenda. So thank you very much for your time and effort. Thank you.